Hello and welcome to an episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason. This is another rock and roll episode and a Beatle-themed episode, and I am at Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. This was the only place in Arkansas, the state of Arkansas, that the Beatles, as a foursome, had been in. And they were only in this town for probably no longer than a half an hour, but either way, this town takes the Beatles' visit very seriously. It was during the height of the Beatles' first North American tour, when they toured so many cities, including St. Louis and all across America. But they had about 3 more stops left, so they had a 2-day break in the tour. And so the Beatles flew from Dallas to here in Walnut Ridge. We'll be going to that airport shortly, but before I go there, I'll be taking you to Beatles Park across the street. But anywho, they went to Walnut Ridge, and word got around quick that the Fab Four were going to be at the airport. So they were there to switch planes. But either way, hundreds of teenagers and locals came to the airport and cheered them on and screamed. But there's more to the story than that. But they eventually flew to a place outside Alton, Missouri, which is in southern Missouri, not too far from here. They flew on a little jet, and they had a day of fun there. But I'll go ahead and take you to Beatles Park. And yes, again, this town takes the Beatles very serious. All right, where to start? I'll get to that sculpture sometime soon. When the Beatles came to town, something new. This is the autographed cover. So this is when the Beatles came to town. And again, I don't know for how long. I'm not going to go into that long newspaper article, but I will go into the footnote. Harry T. Moore, now an attorney in Paragould, was one of the lucky teens who got to see the Beatles when they came to Walnut Ridge. He wrote the story for the Times-Dispatch. Okay, so there are some photographs of it. Pete Snap of Walnut Ridge was on hand with his family and his Brownie Instamatic camera. From the top photo down, he captured color images of Paul McCartney putting on his coat, which is that, George Harrison getting out of the red GMC Suburban, and Ringo Starr walking to the plane. Here's some other photos here. Newell Mock had a love for photography and a camera always at the ready. He captured these black and white images on September 20th, 1964, as the Beatles returned to Walnut Ridge Airport from their weekend vacation at Pigman's Ranch in Missouri. John Lennon is pictured in the 2 photos directly above. In the photo at right, Ringo Starr proceeds through the crowd, followed by John. Now, of course, if I were one of the Beatles at the time, I would not stop and take photos or selfies. Oh wait, selfies didn't exist back then, my bad. Autographs were the thing. I mean, yeah, they would be there for like 2 days just signing autographs. I mean, it would just be nonstop fan action there. So, yeah, I mean, no matter how disappointed people were, the Beatles, they were on a business trip, and that's a tour. The Polar Freeze restaurant as it looked in 1964. Owner Jack Allison, a former Air Force pilot, knew when he heard a large airliner on its approach to Walnut Ridge Airport that something very unusual was afoot. He dispatched 3 teenagers to the airport to find out what was up, and that's how it was discovered that the Beatles were in Walnut Ridge. Walnut Ridge, sorry, not Walnut Ridge. And then here are 2 tickets to the Beatles concerts before and after their stop at Walnut Ridge. This is the one from Dallas, before they came here, and then that was September 18th. And then they departed Sunday, September 20th to finish their American tour with a show in New York. Okay, I lied. I thought I read somewhere where they had like 3 stops left. But this was like their vacation spot. Like where they had like maybe a day of free time. Because I'm not speaking from experience, but when you're a rock star, you have very few free time. All right. So let's see, where do I start here? The Beatles Park. Can you find the hidden items sculptor Danny West add to this Abbey Road rendition? Okay, so you can't really see it probably from the camera, but you can see like inspiration of Beatles songs. Like there's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds somewhere, Taxman, Hey Bulldog, Dr. Robert, named after the guy who sold the Beatles LSD. I don't see any depiction of any drug deal going on here, but I am the walrus. I don't see no walrus here either. It's kind of hard to see with the sunlight. I see Revolution 9 written there. But there's also other things too, like Highway 67 sign. But let's see what this one says. Okay, it kind of says the same thing that I was saying, and plus that marker was saying, but I'll go ahead and read it again. A quiet night in 1964 was interrupted by the unusual sound of an airliner approaching Walnut Ridge Airport. Its arrival sparked enough interest that 3 local teens went to investigate, only to discover John, Paul, Ringo, and George walking from the plane. The Beatles, the biggest rock band in the world, had arrived at Walnut Ridge. After performing in Dallas on that Friday evening, September 18th, the Beatles were headed to a weekend vacation at Pigman Ranch, a dude ranch near Alton, Missouri. The ranch was owned by Reed Pigman Sr., who operated the charter airline on which they flew. Walnut Ridge had the closest airport that could accommodate such a large plane, so plans were for the group to land there secretly and then depart the following Sunday, also secretly. But that secret didn't last. Word spread quickly around town, especially among teens who, like the rest of the country, were in the throes of Beatlemania. A crowd of several hundred was gathered at the airport by Sunday morning, September 20th, to greet the Beatles. Sure enough, they arrived, John and Ringo in a small plane and Paul and George in a GMC Suburban from Pigman Ranch. There were a few hands shaken and autographs given as the Fab Four walked through the Walnut Ridge crowd, and then the Beatles settled into their seats for the flight to New York City, where they would conclude their first American tour. The stopover at Walnut Ridge was but a footnote in the history of the legendary band, but it was much more than that for the community that had a surprise encounter with the one and only Beatles. Lasting memories were made in that brief visit. Photographs, treasured stories, and this sculpture are among the ways we remember a very exciting day and pay tribute to a truly great band. Alright, let's see what this is all about. Trivia at the Ridge. Okay, make your way through downtown Walnut Ridge and see if you can get all the answers correct in our on-site trivia game. Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that, but that involves going to the downtown area. But I am going to do this in a different episode, the guitar walk. So again, here is a sculpture. And I'm sure a majority of you are familiar with the Abbey Road album. That is, of course, that is George, Paul, Ringo, John. And let's see if Paul is barefoot. Yeah, he looks like he is. Okay. Well, you got it right that time. And again, I'll look at that sculpture. And I'll go ahead and take you to a few other Beatles things here, just not too far of a walk. And that right there, by the way, is a historical marker about Washboard Sam, who was from here. He was a major player on the blues scene from the 1930s and 1940s. So if you want to know more about him, I will go ahead and pan up close, and if you want to stop and hit pause, that is awesome. Alright, so here is a tambourine. Oh wait, it doesn't even have a top on it. Never mind. That spells out love. And then we're going to go into a sculpture of the cartoon Beatles. And it is easy to forget that the Beatles had a Saturday morning cartoon show. And if you've seen Yellow Submarine, that is also animated, and it's a good movie. And that, of course, is Yellow Submarine. And now I'm going to go across the street where there's a mural. When I'm 64, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The Walrus. Or, I'm sorry, I Am the Walrus. Remember that One Glass Onion song? The Walrus was Paul. To Let Her Into Your Heart. That's Hey Jude. That, of course, is the Let It Be album cover. Strawberry Fields. This guy is really talented. I really like how he had all the colors lined up. The George one is my favorite one so far. And that is the Eric Clapton and George Harrison song, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, although it is credited to the Beatles, but Eric Clapton reluctantly played on that song, but George insisted. He said, "Hey man, that is my song, I want you to be on it." Conversation over. Reportedly, that's what he said. The girl with the kaleidoscope eyes, of course, Lucy in the Sky. Alright, so that's pretty much all I gotta show you. But again, this community is definitely all Beatles. I mean, just kind of cruise around town, you'll know what I'm talking about. Alright, so now I'm probably about 3 or 4, maybe 5 miles outside of town, north. And in front of me is the Walnut Ridge Regional Airport. And, I mean, yeah, it's not really a busy airport, nothing like that, but it'll still get you where you want to go. But, anywho, yes, these were where hundreds of screaming fans, mostly teenagers, were at. And this was where the Beatles were to switch planes. Let me get up closer to... Alright, so now I'm closer, and I don't know where it all happened, like where the Beatles switched planes. It has to be somewhere obviously in front of me, but kind of hope this gives you an idea of the whole brief happening here in Arkansas. And again, that was the only time the Fab Four have ever been in Arkansas as the Beatles. Now I'm sure Paul McCartney has performed here many times, meaning like maybe a Little Rock or some other city in Arkansas, maybe George Harrison, Ringo Starr, so who knows. But yes, rock and roll history does lie here. Alright, thanks so much for tuning into this rock and roll episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason, just outside Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, at the airport where the Beatles made their only appearance in Arkansas. So, a little rock and roll history episode for you. So I am Jason, signing off.